Back live with you tonight, and thanks for staying on. According to Statistics South Africa, the unemployment rate is currently sitting at 32.9%. These unsettling numbers make the case for government and private lenders to invest in small businesses to revive the economy. And during her department's budget vote, Small Business Development Minister Stella Ndabeni-Abrahams said records show that about 2.5 million SMEs currently employ just under 8 million people. The minister joins us now to give in-depth insight into some of the strategies her department is adopting to deal with the support that SMMEs need in the country. Minister, good to have you with us, and thank you very much for joining us.
Thank you so much, Thabo, and good evening to all the viewers at home.
I mean, if you want to start and say where you sit right now, do you have a sense, for example, of how many small businesses would have closed in the, 300 or so days of load shedding that we have been going through as a country?
Well, Thabo, I wouldn't have the specifics because these numbers, they really fluctuate. And I'm aware that we have sent our team in terms of CFOD to go and try to find out on the ground. Of course, we are aware because it starts by them not being able to pay us. And you know that the business is not doing well, especially those that owe us. So we are consolidating the figures, but of course we don't have the exact numbers. Unfortunately, this is a space that requires too much detail and collaboration with all the stakeholders that get involved in the work that is being done by the SMEs.
Yeah. In your own speech, you say we are in the third iteration of an SME strategy. What are the outcomes of the first? What do we know about the second? What have those iterations achieved?
Well, I'm sure you may have read the Small Business Act, which came up with the establishment of certain institutions that gave credence to the work that has been done by the portfolio, starting when the portfolio was still under GTIC. Because these are legislations that have been there, and we've seen the strategies that then sought to say, how do we incorporate both the cooperatives and the small businesses? But at the heart of that was a clear definition of what is it that entails a small or a micro enterprise. And that was the second one that looked at the different aspects that must talk to a support when we talk about an enterprise that we're talking about. This third one takes a different approach, Thabo. What it looks at, unlike the previous ones, that will look at the tailor-made solution without bringing all the ecosystem players. This one focuses on that to say it's not a strategy that is meant for government only, because this is what we have done in the past. With this one, with that, we do have an appreciation that the work that is being done by small businesses requires multiple numbers of stakeholders. And therefore, if we are to intervene, let's make sure that we have a strategy that looks across board, whether it's different sectors, including different spheres of government and the private sector, as I've already said. And this is what we believe will help turn the tide around to say small businesses have been undergoing lots of challenges, but when we collectively work together towards a common agenda, we will be able to achieve what we want to achieve, which talks to a booming industry as the small businesses.
So let's try and attempt some of the pillars that you're dealing with in your strategy. The first one is the work around the cutting of the red tape. It's nothing new, Minister. If we are really being honest, this is why last year or a year ago, the president decided he's going to put together a red tape reduction task team that's going to be led by Mr. Sipho Nkosi. He himself gets into that position, spends a whole year, and he comes up and he says, I have identified at least 100 red tapes, but in this whole time, I've only been able to deal with 3. And those 3 are around the tourism travel permits, the mining prospecting rights licensing system, the work permits, and the visa permits. He identifies, for example, the informal trading permits as one of the areas, but he hasn't even begun to work on that because he's just saying, I don't have the powers. I'm here. I don't have the structure. I don't have capacity. I'm just literally a guy in an office somewhere now and again who's supposed to deal with this big task of dealing with red tape. So you're saying your strategy, the first pillar, which I suppose is the very first thing that we need to do, is deal with the red tape. What are you going to do differently?
Well, first, let me tell you what we have done before I say what we're going to do in the future. the first thing when we talk about red tape is to have an appreciation that it cuts across, whether you're a small business or a big business. But now the critical sectors, whether you're talking about a farmer who wants to have access to water, he needs water rights or water licenses. That's a red tape on its own. Whether you're going to talk about an entrepreneur that goes to a bank and tries to get a loan, there's lots of stringent processes that are there, and that's a red tape on its own. Whether you're going to talk about the tax through SARS, the tax incentives that are not available for small businesses, and therefore the amounts that get to be charged, that's a red tape on its own. Whether you're going to talk about somebody who says, Minister, I have funding, all I need is land to build a factory and be able to produce my product, that's another red tape. I'm just trying to show you that this is something that cuts across all sectors, which is why Mr. Ngosi would never finish it in 1 year. Not only him, which is why he works with these departments, including my department, in trying to resolve this. Everything that we do in this country, Thabo, is embedded in the law. Now, we have a business act that was established years ago, so many years ago, not in the past 20 years, but very old legislation. You have other pieces of legislation, whether you go to local government, they also entrust certain responsibilities to municipalities. Now, if you are going to deal with an enterprise that must be able to trade in a conducive environment, you've got to do a thorough study to say, what is it that affects small business in the agricultural sector, in the fishing industry, in the different sectors that we're talking about, and therefore bring all the pieces of legislations that govern those sectors. Once you bring all of those, you're then able to say this clause is an impediment on SMMEs in terms of them having access to market or whatever trade that they're supposed to do. This is why we conducted that study, and we came up with about 116, as things stand, 116 pieces of legislation that we say they need to be reviewed. Should we wait for that, Thabo? We can't. We know in our country, amending a legislation or repealing any act, it takes too long. It doesn't take less than 24 months. We are aware that the small businesses do not have that luxury of waiting for us to chase that. This is why, from our side as a department, we then said, in everything that has to do with local government, let's go to SALGA, where we can get access to all the local government structures. We went and presented our case. We all agreed fast. We have a responsibility to build on local economic development. Every entrepreneur that we service resides in a ward, which means as the municipality, you have a critical role to play. And the fact that your industry is not booming, it means that your people will not be able to pay rates. Then we said, what is that you need to look at? We then agreed there's the issue of the payment of the permit fees that small businesses complain about, the issue of the rezoning, so many bylaws that exclude our people. And we then agreed with SALGA that we're going to join forces in order to make sure that where possible, the municipalities may be able to find ways of coming up with standardized bylaws that must give access to a fair or conducive trade for small businesses. As I'm speaking to you right now, SALGA, during the period of June and July, they are undergoing their members assemblies in the provinces, which will culminate to a national members assembly in August. And after that, we have been advised that they'll be developing their implementation plan to say what is it that they can do, whilst we are busy with the process of amending the legislation. Yeah. The second aspect is on the registration of small businesses on CIPC. We've had engagements with them. We've had engagements with SARS on the tech side, and we all agree that let's join forces, let's go all out, provide tax awareness, be able to shorten the timelines that are needed, and see where possible where we can then, as the government, introduce incentives for small businesses. That's dealing with red tape. It's not something that you can deal with it in 2 years because it fluctuates. It changes every day.
So on that question of compliance, so one of the things that small businesses believe it's the easiest, for example, to have been achieved is to centralize the process where these things can be done, right? And they're saying, we've been begging the small business department to build centers, especially in rural areas, because these SMEs are really interested in doing business and trading, right? They don't want to be held up in the cumbersome process of, I've got to firstly go on a bus and go to town and then go and stand in a queue in an office in order to submit my documents. And then I've got to wait and drive. It's costly, it's time consuming. centralize this, put it in one place. I can do tax, I can do UIF, I can register if I need to. What is inhibiting that from happening?
Well, we are in a process of digitizing the products that we have, and this is informed by exactly what you've just said. We've engaged with the critical stakeholders that we need on the digital platform that we are building. We've learned since COVID that our people are able to utilize their cell phones for their own benefit. Therefore, we are building from that, not to say we're choosing only those that are tech-savvy, but we have seen it has worked for the COVID, the 350 grants and the other things that have been utilized through the cell phone. Now, that common platform is a platform that will make sure that you have UIF or the Department of Labor, you have SARS, you have everybody. But for that to happen, we need to make sure that we have developed a platform that is interactive, so that as and when the user wants to use it, one can be able to get a response immediately, but also one should be able to feedback, which is why we said, let us make sure that the platform that we're going to develop, it has AI capabilities, because we deal with people at the textile line, we deal with learned people, we deal with people who have never been to school. Therefore, it's important to emphasize the issue of language, that when people utilize the platform, they don't say, I can't even apply it because these documents are written in English that I don't understand. So we had to deal with the issue of simplifying the language that we use for applications, whilst we're shortening all the papers that we have. We are in a process of finalizing that. Hopefully, before the end of the year, we'll be launching that platform, which is being developed, because it has to be tested. We've got to make sure that all the stakeholders are comfortable with the security of information that will be found on that platform. That's not the only thing. Of course, we can't entirely rely on digital. We said we're introducing a hybrid model, wherein if we bring CIFA, SIDA, and CBDA at one place, which talks to a merged entity or a one-stop center, people can be able to do walk-ins, those that still want to interact with a human being. They can be able to do walk-ins. But of course, in certain municipalities, as things stand, we've appointed about 16 district development model or DDM coordinators in the areas where we don't have much footprint. This is meant to ensure that people can have access, and also we can get all the products being coordinated by somebody that can be a liaison between the LED of the municipality, the stakeholders that exist on the ground, the SMME and that department and any other person. All of this tower is meant to ensure that when an enterprise walks into an office, our office, they can get all the information. We are liaising with other DFIs, both in the provinces and at national, those that have something to do with the small businesses, to say we've got to collaborate so that we can be able that if one walks into NEF, one can get information about SIDA and SIFA. Same applies to if you go to SIDA. We should be able to get all the information.
We just touched on the red tape aspect of it. The minister still will expand on the access to market strategy, access to funding and enterprise development, and what her department is going to be doing there. If you've got some thoughts and comments for the minister, send them through on 072-110-5584, or you can tweet us tonight at Newzroom405. In Focus continues with you shortly. And we have just touched on one. Minister, I just want us to maybe see if in the couple of minutes that we have, we can be able to touch on the others. But let's talk about your strategy for access to markets. I mean, if I look at it, summing it up, it's going to be some trade shows and exhibitions. It's going to be buy local campaign. It's going to be a local platform, online platform that you are going to be creating for SMEs, particularly women. And you are also going to create some kind of access to international markets through also the Africa Free Trade area. If we look, for example, just the proudly South African aspect of it, 250 products that are going to be manufactured. How? People don't have electricity. Who's going to manufacture anything without electricity? It's an ambitious goal to say they'll have 250 products. Where are they going to get the 250 products without the lights on?
Well, Chabo, the first mistake that we are making is to assume that the products don't exist. There's so many products that are produced by entrepreneurs out there, but they don't have access to market. And this is what has informed us to be able to also, even just for the previous year, we've submitted a list of 600 products that are produced by small businesses to National Treasury so that they can be procured from. Now, this financial year, we said 250. You've heard us talking about the energy relief scheme that we are working on, which is also part of the budget vote. I did mention in my budget vote that we are going to, for example, on TRAP, we have set aside 900 million rands, and we are going to be building markets. If you go to certain areas, there's markets where you get lots of micro and small businesses trading in one place that is being built by government. And we did say that we're going to do that, and we've set aside 70 million rands to power those markets, which we will be piloting in 7 districts throughout the country. Now, if we power that, means we're taking that burden away from the small business of saying, I don't have any energy or I don't have money to pay for diesel. What government would have looked at that. But also, through the other purchase power scheme that we've spoken about at CIFA, we'll be able to lend some money to small businesses to be able to put alternative energies, just like also the Minister of Finance has pronounced on the bounce back scheme, that they will also be looking at that. We are trying everything in our power to make sure that we really take away the burden from the small businesses so that they can be able to help us create jobs, because when they're able to trade properly, they make profits, they take the burden away from the state so that Minister of Finance doesn't have to pay people 250 rands because people will be active in the economy. So we are working with all the sectors to make sure that we deal with the challenge that we're faced with. It's also an opportunity for small businesses that you can go for example, the solar installation and any other thing that talks to the energy economy that they can benefit from. So we are there to say we're introducing these measures, but we're going to at least provide relief to those and ensure that their space where they already exist, it is protected and they can work accordingly.
A number of access to funding interventions that you are talking about in your budget vote. SMEs say, the challenge becomes a small business that wants to expand but don't have a strong enough balance sheet, and therefore they cannot take advantage of these interventions that you are introducing as places of raising funds. How do you address them?
Well, the first thing, for example, in our interventions that we're looking at is the turnover, the annual turnover of each company. That's why if you go to the smaller guys, we've said at least up to 5 million, those that have an annual turnover of up to 3 million rands, we're providing a grant space. It's a grant intervention, not a loan. Therefore, as long as we have evidence, because we're going to do the due diligence to make sure that indeed the business exists and it meets all the requirements that we're talking about. And then those that are above 3 million on annual turnover, they are able to go for the blended financing, we believe, that they can then access. We have even relaxed our criterion because ours is to make sure that these businesses can trade. We are the only department, Thabo, that has a responsibility of developing small businesses. We said we can't develop criteria that is like the commercial banks and any other person who's just doing it to make profit. Ours is to make sure that we pay for the developmental dividend, and therefore if it means we must be able to take somewhere to save the existing businesses whilst we're also trying to work on introducing new ones. We can't afford to let the existing ones die, which is why with a limited budget, I'm sure you have seen the figures, with a limited budget, we said if it is 20 that we must save, let's make sure that we can save 20, whilst we continue to engage our partners, including National Treasury, to bring more resources. And this is why I said we're working with the Minister of Finance to make sure that on the bounce back scheme, they can relax the conditions. Because the conditions have been there. This is why small businesses have not been able to access that fund. So we explain to them that it is not the same thing. You can't all want the high-end criterion and whatever conditions that you put for small businesses. The environment is completely different. The municipalities are coming on board in terms of saying there's space, there's land, there's everything. How do you work together to make sure that we save the small businesses? As I said, we took it back to them to say a small business trades in your own area, and therefore as the municipality should be able to find ways to incentivize. When you go to big businesses under TTIC, they get so many incentives. And this is what we are trying to bring for small businesses as we continue to engage all the affected stakeholders that must help us relieve the burden from the small businesses so that they can really meet the target of creating the jobs as enshrined in the National Development Plan.
Minister, we appreciate your time. Thanks so much for coming on. Don't take too long to come back, right? Because we still have a lot of other areas that we need to talk to.
Now, you command and I'll be there.
Much appreciated. Thank you very much. That's the Minister of Small Business Development, Stella Ndabeni-Abrahams.